This is Eric Lee, and thank you for joining us again for another episode of the Elite Agent Training Podcast. I've got one of my great agents here, Kade Lucero. And Kate's, I don't know how long you've been with me either. It's all a blur, everybody that I talk to. It's not been too long. What is it?
Five? I don't know, probably. I've been an agent for about 10 years. I don't know how long I've been with Equity. Okay. I've bounced around. I'm home now at Equity, but I've bounced around a little bit.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
But Kade has some different stories to tell than other agents that we've interviewed in the past. He's branched out and expanded in some areas in real estate that I'm excited to talk to you about today. So thank you for joining us here today.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Now, typically I like to get started just to get to know somebody. There's a lot of listeners that might be real estate agents that are just getting into this as a career. We have listeners that are very part-time and they're always toying with the idea, how do I make that decision to take this full-time and, take that risky step? So I want to hear from you. What was it that got you into this business and how did that come about?
Yeah. So I was actually in high school, and my buddy's dad sold real estate in the 90s and did extremely well. Even back then, did very, very well. And he's since retired for decades, but he bought a lot of real estate. And I'd go and hang out at his house after school, and it's the middle of the afternoon, and he's home in this big nice house, and my parents are at work. And I'm okay. What do I want to do? Do I want to go that route, or do I want to go? Do I want season passes for my family of 6 to Disneyland like he had?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what got me into it.
It's almost like the rich dad poor dad story.
It is rich, absolutely, 100%. Yep. Yeah, totally. So, so it started really. Yeah, I mean, as soon as I was 16 and had a car, I was, if my parents aren't listening, I was skipping school to go look at real estate. That's what I was doing with my buddy, and so that's kind of how I got started. And then I did an internship in high school when I was 17 at a real estate office.
Oh, really?
For a few months, and had enough credits, and so I was really that's pretty much what I was doing.
So the state doesn't let you get your license till you're 18. Were you on top of it as soon as you were 18?
Yeah. Yep. So 18 in 3 weeks. So youngest agent in the state, probably one of the youngest in the country.
Yeah.
If someone was younger, it was because their state processed their license in 2 weeks instead of 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, 18 and then high school diploma. So I graduated early in March. And yeah, everybody else was going to school till May, and I was going to the office. So
that's a fun story. I've thought a lot about that. I got into real estate, let's see, when I was 30. This is 20 years for me. So if you do the math, that makes me 45. Yeah. maybe 39. But yeah, and I've thought often, if I hadn't wasted so much time with other jobs, if I'd gotten into this, and it turns out, I mean, I didn't know anything about real estate, but I get into it, and my mom comes to me and says, your grandpa was a real estate agent. I'm like, no, I didn't know that. That would have been cool to know, and maybe give me an advantage. But I have wondered that a lot, and much to the bemusement of my ex-wife, I've told my own kids, like, hey, I'd love for you guys to come work with me. You don't have to go to college.
No, yeah, exactly.
She's like, don't tell them that.
Yep.
So that's fun. That's cool that you got started that early.
Yeah. And
how hard was it for you to get the business off the ground?
Impossible. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like it was bad. And fortunately, I was living at home, and so I didn't have any, if you have a family and it's harder. But no, it was hard. I called for sell by owners and expireds, because that's what you did back in the day. And it was bad. Everyone else seemed like they were getting all this business from this, and I was calling people. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd put a tie on, because that's what you have to do to be successful, and I'd go to the office and I'd call people who don't want to be called all day long and get hung up on and cursed at. And then at 5 o'clock, everyone's going home, and I get in my O2 Hyundai Accent with no AC, and I go out and I knock doors for 2 or 3 hours. And I did that for 6 months until I got a deal that was, I won't go into it, but it was luck, Yeah. And then I totally changed how I was doing my business.
What did you change to?
Well, so I went more online, and I started doing more open houses for agents, and I wanted people to come to me.
Yeah.
It just changes the dynamic. When someone calls you, they want something from you, and I can provide,
Right.
I can show this house, versus, hey, can I list your house? I know you don't want to pay me because it's for sale by owner, or you hate your last agent because it's expired, and you don't like agents because they don't sell houses because you're listing but
Yeah.
so I just changed the dynamics. How can I get people to come to me versus
Okay.
go to them?
I like that. I came prior to the age with social media and all that stuff. And so for me, that was I did a lot of what you did. I didn't know anybody. So I was making the phone calls and I was knocking doors, and I just did it long enough that it happened to work. But it was 8 months in, and I'd only closed 4 deals, which paid the bills barely. I mean, we were just operating right on that thin line. And then I changed how I was doing it and just turned it more into a business. And, I systemized everything that I did, and I tracked my results, and I said, okay, if I do this long enough every day, then I'll get at least 1 appointment a week. And for me, I took the hard part of it for me was getting myself to do that every day. And so I just turned it into a habit that you have to do this every day. This is what you do every day. And that worked. But we have evolved. And yeah, there's still agents that do that,
Yeah. There's not much inventory now,
Right.
but expireds don't exist. But whatever works.
But we've evolved, and there are more options available.
There are a lot more options.
Back then, those were kind of the options. Go do this, and there are more options available today. And I like hearing people that made it to the top in a different way than I did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a good story.
Yeah.
Now, most of the people that I talk to have, they have a good, loyal customer base, at this point. Because again, when you start, it's harsh to do phone calls and door knocking and all that stuff, doing that every day. And there's people that still do it. They've made an entire career out of it. They're making 400 calls a day. They're using special software, the auto dialer software. It's brutal. It's a brutal game, but they do it and they make it work. And that is one of the ways to make it work. But most of the people that I talk to prefer to have, like you said, people come to them. What is it that you've done that makes yourself stand out to your sphere of influence, the people that know you? What is it you do that makes you stand out so that they want to keep coming back to you?
So I didn't start with a sphere, and I don't even like to call it a sphere today because it's not a sphere. It's a network. That's a small difference, but it's like, sphere is like family, friends. When I started, I was 8. I was a child.
Yeah.
I'm 28 now. I'm still a child to a lot of people. I have to keep this goatee because I'm
the same way. If I don't have this, people think I'm 20. It's so frustrating.
I look like I'm 12, but with a goatee, I look like I'm 15. So it helps. But no, so I didn't have that. So family, like you're a kid. I'm not going to use you to, and friends are literally in high school going to math class. I didn't have any.
Homes.
Yeah, they're not buying home. And so I didn't know anybody. So anyway, how do I differentiate myself is I create indisputable value to the point where you don't have a choice but to use me. If you want to do what I do, which is invest in real estate, and that's 80-90% of my business, I work with investors. There's not a lot of agents that know how to do that.
Yeah.
And could even tell you what a house would rent for, or I can help you find a rental property, and they start showing them condos. Like, this is not a, and so I just create that value, and that value comes from knowledge. That's mostly been a lot of stuff that's been self-taught, a lot of stuff that has been learned from some of the old dogs in the industry that did business in the 80s, and that's all they did was seller financing. And so I've learned a lot from them and how to structure deals. And I've done, this is another thing, if anyone's listening and is looking for an investor agent, whoever you use, the number one question should be, well, do you own any rental property?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, or if it's, I do, it was a house that I bought and then I moved out of it, and so you're a landlord by default, you didn't buy that to rent it.
Right.
That's not a landlord. That's not a, so.
Right.
So that's how I do. And And so with that knowledge, and after having discussions with people on how to structure deals and all these things, I can showcase that knowledge. And I've had people who their mother-in-law is an agent and they still use me.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't know how to structure or negotiate this stuff. I've had branch managers of mortgage companies. How many agents does a branch manager at a mortgage company that's been doing for 30 years?
Right. Hundreds
of agents.
Yeah.
Did not have a pre-existing relationship with him, didn't know him through family or church or anything. I met him and said, this is what I do. And he's like, great, let's do it. I was going to tell you about this. I haven't yet. I just had a buyer broker agreement signed by another licensed agent. So I'm now representing another licensed agent. And it's not like she sells one house a year. She doesn't sell as much as I do, but she does it for a living.
Yeah.
And she called on my listing, and I started talking with her and talking about terms and stuff. And I said, well, would you consider interest only? And she said, oh, that didn't really even occur to me. Oh, okay. So I started talking about why that's better for both parties, and talked about some other stuff. And I said, okay, well, and how do you want to close that? Like, how do you want to record that? There's no underlying mortgage. We're not going to do a wrap or anything like that.
Right.
Do you need a trust deed, or can we do a contract for deed or a uniform real estate contract? Can we do any of this stuff? And she just kind of paused and was like, I literally don't know what any of that is.
Yeah.
And so the conversation just evolved, and I just said, listen, I'm just going to help you find something. And she's like, would you? I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. So she's looking, in conclusion, her and her husband are looking for a $1 million investment property. They'll probably get a fourplex, maybe a really nice triplex. And is forfeiting a $30,000 commission so that I can represent
knows
her.
What they're doing.
Yeah. But if I save her 2 points, if I get her 5% interest instead of 7%, and you don't just ask for that.
Yeah.
You got to play with the terms a little bit. And how do we get, make it better for them, but better for you? If I can save them 2 points and they're paying 5% instead of 7% on $1 million, that saves them $20,000 a year in interest.
And even without calculating the savings, and I believe you can do that, but there's a lot of other things that you can calculate into it. Would they ever get one? Would they get discouraged with the process? Right. Would they say everything's too expensive right now? And I hear this from a lot of people. Interest rates are high enough now that you can't really do investing because interest rates are so high you can't cash flow anything.
Yeah.
And that stops a lot of people in their tracks. And so whether they're saving money or not, they're sitting on this money that's not doing anything for them in the stock market. You help them do something with it, show them a way to structure it to actually make it work, that without you, they wouldn't have it at all.
Yeah. You can always, in any market, you can find a reason to not do a deal. But likewise, you can also find a reason to do a deal. There's no competition now.
Yeah.
Like I've talked to guys that, and I've got my hands in a couple other deals personally, so I was going to scoop it up. But I just saw a fourplex in West Valley. They took off the market. Phenomenal. I won't go into the details, but phenomenal terms. 10 years, interest only, 5%. It was like 10% down. For $100,000, you control $1 million asset, and they took it down because there was a lack of interest.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. So I'm gonna sell some stuff. I'm gonna move some stuff around, see what we can do. But yeah, you can always find a reason to do a deal or to not do in any market, but you can't make money on a property you don't own. Yeah. So just buy in every market is just kind of my mantra.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love that value. What distinguishes you? I create indisputable value.
Yeah.
Where they have to use me.
You have to. Yeah. You have to. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's great. So that takes a lot of knowledge. Now you said following some old dogs, learning some trial and error. Are you in any of the investor associations? I know that we've got, some of our brokers run like the Salt Lake Real Estate Investor Association or the Northern Utah Investor Association. Do you affiliate with some of those?
I used to go to the RIA meetings and some other stuff. It's there's a lot of new people there, and that's great because we all start somewhere.
Right.
I didn't think at this point, I think it's a great place for people to go and start and get their feet wet and learn the terms and all this. But it's not a good use of my time at this point because I'm mostly answering questions than
you're not
asking
benefiting
questions.
as much.
Yeah.
You're just
I'll go to industries. I just went to a conference in Salt Lake. It's actually a national conference. Just happened to be held in Salt Lake. There was a multifamily conference, and so I'll do stuff like that, to learn.
Yeah.
And just we need to learn from our elders and the people. The second to last deal that I did for it was a fourplex in Salt Lake, and the agent came out and showed me the property, really old school, shook his hand, actually met the owner there. It was his 80th birthday, and he was showing property. He's been a licensed agent for 60 years.
That's cool.
And his name slips my mind, and that's going to bother me, but he actually helped draft the seller financing addendum.
Oh, really?
So it was kind of an honor to meet him. I use this addendum all the, and
was he
so
up there in Cache Valley?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, he was in Salt Lake.
Okay. Some of my favorite old dogs are up there in Cache Valley.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Yeah.
I have this is just a sidebar, but like my real estate attorney, you have a good real estate attorney when he comes in cowboy boots, because nobody knows more about real estate than an old farmer or
right.
So yeah, I get what you're saying with the Cache Valley stuff.
Yeah, cool. So we've talked about where most of your business comes from, kind of in a roundabout way, but just to ask you directly, it's primarily investors that you're working with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The nice thing about that is if you make it work for them, they become repeat clients because you're making them money. And if you didn't make it work for them, you wouldn't be where you're at, because you'd have somebody would come in, experience a big loss because you didn't know what you were doing. They'll, of course, never use you again. They won't refer you again. But you've been doing this for a while now, and it's dominoed to the point where you're consistently one of the higher performers.
Yeah. And it's so weird. I was thinking about this the other day. I talk myself out of more business than business that I get, and so I think that's one of the reasons that I have gotten the referrals that I get. I get referrals from lenders because I don't. If you've ever heard of that, a lender giving an agent a referral, usually it's the opposite. They're taking us to lunch to get our clients. Because they'll have someone that looks for 4 or 5, 6 months and they can't find anything because nothing cash flow, blah, 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 whatever. And like, well, before you give up, call Kade and then we're under contract in like 3 weeks. And they do that because they know I can get those deals. But I talk myself out of more business because like I'll have a guy that calls me and say, I want to sell this property and I want to buy something else. And I'm like, well, can I ask why you want to sell this property? Well, I won't qualify for another one. Okay. Well, why don't we refi this? I've got some non-QM contacts that you don't need tax returns to do this, or you could refi that traditionally, and then we'll use seller financing to buy your next one. Like I really don't want you. He who dies with the most real estate wins.
Yeah.
I really don't want you to. I'm a real estate agent. I don't get paid to tell you this. I really don't want you to sell this place. If you need to and personal stuff, fine. But if we can do it without selling it,
then we can build some wealth.
I've never met someone that sold a property that wasn't in like a personal hardship situation, but that sold a property that didn't regret it 5 years later.
Yeah.
Right. And so, or someone, I'm constantly saying no. Someone will say, oh yeah, this is the one. Let's write an offer. And I look at, and just at a glance, I see the price and I see the unit mix, and I say, these are 1-bed, 1-bath units. In the same price range, we can find stuff that are 2-bed, 1-bath units. They're going to rent for 20% more for the same price. Yeah. We're not writing on this.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, And so I'll underwrite, sometimes 100 properties to get one.
To find the one
that works. And when it does, they're ecstatic, and then they keep coming back. And I don't have a lot of people that I work with.
Right.
They'll do 3 deals a year.
Yeah.
And
you don't need a lot.
You don't need a lot. Yeah.
The ones you have are doing 3 deals a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me give you a second. I'm going to ask a question for me, but I'm going to ask one for you here as well. And I know that you've talked to me about this a little bit in the past, but give me a little plug about some of the unique things that you're doing right now to help investors that may be a little less savvy. They've got some money, it's doing nothing for them in the bank. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing that can help them.
Yeah. So I've been able to add a lot of value to individual investors, who want to buy some property, but it's still, I still have a lot of people, they just still don't want to deal with it. They're like, yeah, that's great. I know I can make more money. I know it's a more stable asset. I know there's tax benefits. I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to qualify for the loan. I don't want to manage the tenants. I don't want to manage the manager, right, with the property manager. And so I started a fund, and it's called Cedarway Capital. And you check us out. It's cedarwaycapital.com. And so basically what I do is I raise money from investors, people who want to invest in real estate, but they don't want to manage it. So they get all of the benefits. You get all the you get K1s, you get all the pass-through tax benefits, you get all the cash flow, you get everything. I find the deal, I source the deal, I finance the deal, I negotiate the deal. We do the refis, we do the disposition, the sales, we just do everything. It's not a mutual fund, but it's like a mutual fund.
Yeah.
For real estate.
Yeah.
So
they have an ownership interest in it.
Yeah, they have an ownership interest, and like I said, they get a K1, and it's been a great option for a lot of people who don't want to get their hands dirty or want to diversify a little bit, or and it's not always, I've raised money from landlords who have been doing this for 30 years and they love real estate, but they don't want to manage it. So they'll sell their property and invest in the fund, or people have an IRA. Most people don't know, you can buy real estate in your IRA. And so we accept IRA funds, some 401k fund, you can do a rollover or whatever, but, so we're raising capital to do bigger deals across the country. And then you really get me, because then I can negotiate not just as your agent, but now as another form of fiduciary. Yeah. And you don't have to do anything.
That's cool.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I'm really excited about it. Yeah. So we're adding a lot of value. We're adding real estate to people's retirement portfolios, and that didn't know that it was possible. Yeah. So it's really cool.
Putting some things within reach that otherwise might not be.
Yeah. And like you said, the stock market's been down double digits for a year and a half.
Yeah.
A year, like, even if it was up, there's no tax benefits. Like it's just, So, that's something that I'm excited about. We're doing deals.
And those are some complicated things. And I know we have agents listening. And one of my concerns is with new agents. There's like you mentioned with some of these classes, it's a lot of new people going. I see a lot of bad concepts being taught. Yeah. My hackles go up a little bit. Anytime somebody starts talking, well, let's get creative here.
Yeah.
There are creative legal ways to do things.
Yeah.
But I see people stepping over that line almost always unknowingly.
Yeah.
And some people are caught up in the wake, the newer real estate agents and things like that. One of the things that you've mentioned, is you've got a real estate attorney that overlooks all of this stuff. He makes sure that it's done the correct way so that everybody can experience the benefits that you're.
Yeah. Your broker is your best friend, and we don't talk a lot, but when we do, I feel like it's not a big problem, but it could go wrong if it's not done the right way, or it's a very obscure thing. And I've been really impressed with you too, because sometimes I run across stuff and you're like, oh yeah, this and this, so you're very familiar with that. So your broker is your best friend, and specific to what I'm doing, anytime you accept investment from someone that's regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, and you will go to prison. So you need a don't try this at home type of thing, right? Yeah. You need a real estate attorney, and you need a good one. And I interviewed probably 10 of them. And, but your broker's your best friend. And when in doubt, ask. And there's a top agent, and I'll say his name because he's great. His name's Joe Holden. He's at Berkshire Hathaway. Yeah. And he's not only a top agent there, he's a top agent in the state. And I was fortunate enough, that's where I started, was Prudential before it was Berkshire. And he kind of took me under his wing and taught me some stuff. And I remember there was a situation, and I was young, obviously, young in age and young in business. And I don't remember the exact situation, but I believe it was my listing, and the buyer's agent we were trying to figure out how to do something outside of closing, which is not good.
Right.
Like loan fraud, like really bad.
Yeah.
And so he just said, well, why don't you just increase my buyer agent commission, and I'll take my commission, and then that excess I'll pass on to the buyer, right? And so it's still on the HUD. They were HUDs at that time,
Right.
And I'm like, okay. Now I would say take a hike. If we can't do it the right way, we're not going to do it. I guess the deal's going to die because we're not going to. But so I went into Joey's office and I said, Joe, what do you think about this? And immediately he said, if you have to ask, the answer's no.
Yeah.
If it's not, and there's things we ask about, hey, how do we get creative with this, or how can we structure this deal? But you just don't want to go down that road.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that conversation every single day. I said, just the fact that we're on the phone right now, because they're like, how would you interpret this? I'm like, if it's up for interpretation, our paperwork's not clear.
Yep.
Let's do a better job.
Yep.
So now a question for me.
Yeah.
All right. And not so much for me, but for everybody listening. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a brand new agent starting out in this business that, we talk about 85% failing within their first year? And you had a rough start as well.
Yeah.
What would you say is the one piece of advice that you would give them to help them be in that top 10, 15%?
Yeah, I would say you need to specialize in something. Doesn't matter what it is, whatever makes sense to you. You need to specialize in something. So, full transparency, I was like an average agent. I mean, I paid the bills. I was able to buy a house. I was, for most of my career. But in the last few years, I have specialized in investors, and I became an expert in that. And, we can do anything, but we can't do everything.
Right.
So if you're willing to just sell any, you never get an opportunity to specialize. And if you never specialize, you can never differentiate.
Yeah.
And there's no value there. And so if you want to specialize, like when I was starting, and your specialization may change. When I was starting, I worked with first-time home buyers. I'm a kid, so I'm going to help kids.
Yeah.
So what do first-time home buyers buy? They buy condos.
Yep.
They're cheap. And so I specialized in condos. I knew every HOA and what they covered and which ones would allow you to rent in their bylaws. So if they wanted to move out at a later date and all this other, in every community and I'm like, yeah, let's get this one and this one. And this is an interesting story. Everything used to be FHA loans. Yeah. And if a condo community is not FHA approved, you can't get an FHA loan.
Right.
That was like 90% of what everybody did. And so I would identify, okay, which condo projects are FHA approved? And then I would set up a hot sheet that gave me a listing alert for properties that only had cash conventional terms advertised. And so they'd sit on the market for till they almost expired because people thought that you couldn't buy it on an FHA loan. I knew that you could.
Right.
But an agent messed up. One little checkbox on the input sheet of FHA, and no one looks at the house.
Yeah.
And so, then you get it for a killer deal because it's
been sitting there for a while.
Because it's been sitting there for a while. And, so anyway, that's what you need to specialize.
Okay.
Specialize in condos, specialize in investor stuff. Maybe you specialize in open houses. There was a guy when I started, he did open houses, and that's all he did to market. And he got these massive, like they have at car dealerships, like those big flags.
Oh, yeah.
Had these big old flags and one of those wavy things, the blow up thing that car dealership, in the front yard and all this stuff. And he had more turnout at those open people that didn't even want to buy or sell, but would show up, and it looks really good to the sellers. And he got sellers. He didn't just usually we hold him to get buyers, and he got buyers. But sellers would come in and say, I want to sell my house. Would you do
all this stuff
for me? And so we got listings from open houses. And so just specialize, become good at something.
Yeah, I've never thought about it like that. I think when I started, I was probably specialized in for sell by owners. I got really good at it. And I'd have other agents come up to me and say, why are you doing this? This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And not only did they not see the results I was getting, they couldn't even see why I would do it in the first place.
Yeah.
And I'm like, your blind spot is where I'm making all my money.
And
it was great.
Uh-huh.
So That's great. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's been good having you on here, Kate. I appreciate your time joining us here, sharing some of your knowledge. All this stuff makes me think where I could be better too. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Any last words?
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say, I'll try and be brief, but the last thing I would say is maybe a last piece of advice would be that as agents, we focus so much on selling and it's very transactional. And I think that we don't realize that there's going to be a time when you don't want to show houses on a Saturday evening anymore.
Yeah.
And so, for someone, we need to buy what we're selling, which is real estate. And so I would just advise everyone to invest in real estate in any way that you can. If you can only afford a condo, then buy a condo. If you can only afford it, and build up to it. And so I wanted to touch on just a couple of points before we ended, because no one told me this when I started.
Yeah.
And if I would have known those things, I would be worth many, many, many millions more.
Yeah.
And so real estate, just a simple acronym that I use for a lot of my investors. Real estate is the ideal investment. So I is income, D is depreciation, E is equity, A is appreciation, and L is leverage. And so those are all kind of the great benefits. And we like to say there's two types of people in this world: people who pay taxes and people who own real estate.
Yeah.
So there's great benefits to doing that. And I guess I think the last thing that I would end on is there's a big misconception that we buy real estate for cash flow. And it doesn't matter what interest rates are. Most properties just don't cash flow.
Right. Especially
after maintenance and other stuff. But when we that last that L, right, leverage, that is why we invest in real estate. And this is the one thing I wish I would have known, is that when you can put 20% down on a property, if you're buying a $1 million property and you can put $200,000 down, that $1 million property is going to appreciate. Let's say it's 5% a year.
Right.
You're going to make $50,000. Okay. There's closing costs and other things. These are one-time fees that are spread out over the life of the investment. They're not huge. So you've got $1 million property. It's going to go up in value by 5% to make $50,000, but you only put $200,000 down. So that's a 25% rate of return.
Right.
Which is excellent.
Year after year, and that's only one of those numbers in your ideal.
That's only one of the number, and
letters, I suppose.
Yeah, one of the letters in our thing, but that's the most important thing, is because you only put up 20% or 10% if you sell or finance. That's the other thing. You don't need tax returns. There's non-QM loans out there. There's DSCR loans that people can look up. And the seller financing, and just do whatever you need to do. And that should be a focus, is to buy real estate and understand that we don't buy for the cash flow. We buy for the appreciation, that leveraged growth. And again, like you said, that's year after year after year. I don't flip I have, but I don't flip houses. I buy rentals on great terms, and I throw tenants in there, and I fix stuff promptly. And if I lose a few $100 a month, okay, I keep some cash so I can cover that. But I'm going to, double my money in 4 years.
Yeah.
Every 4 years.
Yeah.
For the rest of my life. And it's all tax-free.
That's cool.
So anyway.
Well, thank you.
That's what I would end on.
I appreciate the final word. That's a good ending right there.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. And that's a wrap for today's episode. We hope you found the discussion valuable. Remember, if you're looking to take your own real estate career to the next level, be sure to visit eliteagenttraining.com for our exclusive training program. It doesn't matter if you're a brand new agent or a veteran in the industry. If you're looking to increase your business, this program will get you there. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more valuable insights and tips. Until next time.